Welcome to the 19th episode of Dialogika. I'm Stephanie Tangkilisan, and this week we have a very special guest, my friend Tika.
My name is Tika.
So basically, Sweden's still out licking his wound after the Hillary defeat. So we have Tika, who's going to be with us today as a special guest and a fellow Chinese-Indonesian woman.
Yep.
And we're going to talk about racism towards Chinese-Indonesian in Indonesia, especially after November 4th, the anti-Ahok demonstration. We're going to talk about structural racism, privilege, and basically our fears as Chinese-Indonesians. So this is more of a conversational and confessionary episode where we are trying to make people who are non-Chinese-Indonesian understand what it feels like to be Chinese-Indonesian. So here's to it. So we have a very special guest.
My name is Skolastika Lupitawina.
Which is a very awesome name.
Yeah.
Like when I first met you, I was like,
Whoa!
that is such a cool name.
Everyone says that. Is that an Indonesian name? And I was like
Just Skolastika, right? Like learned,
it's
educated.
It's a saint.
Yeah.
It's the name of a saint.
And Tika works for Pijaru.
Which is part of Kompas Gramedia, focusing on video.
Uh-huh.
I also write for some publications like Magdalene, which is a awesome feminist webzine, and also Cinema Poetica, which is a film webzine. You should check it out, it's amazing. And also a Cubicle Slate.
So basically what happened, just to recap for people who are not that familiar, our current Jakarta governor, Basuki Tjahaja Purnama, commonly known as Ahok, had a speech in 1,000 Islands where he said that Muslims were being fooled by Al-Ma'idah 51, or a specific verse that said that you cannot vote for a non-Muslim head of state or governor. This was edited and spread out and propagated by a few organizations that essentially charge Ahok of blasphemy and insulting the religion of Islam, which resulted in a massive demonstration of 100,000 to maybe 500,000 people flooding Jakarta on November 4th.
3 weeks ago, thousands of protesters vented their anger against Jakarta's governor for questioning the meaning of a Quranic verse. This Friday, they say there will be many more, and they'll be coming from all over Indonesia. During a recent election event, the capital's Christian governor, known as Ahok, had urged voters not to believe a statement by religious scholars that according to a verse in the Quran, Muslims can't be governed by a non-Muslim. A radical group, the Islamic Defenders Front, filed a case for blasphemy against the governor, and other groups have called for his arrest. Although Friday's rally is addressing religious sentiments, much of it is about politics. The governor of Jakarta is a crucial position in Indonesia. Ahok, who is leading the poll, says he's ready to face any legal process.
I think the most important for this country is law enforcement. So I will subdue to what the law wants.
You already apologized, but Muslim groups are still angry. What do you want to say to them?
Don't ask me. I never mean to blaspheme because I have my family. I have my mom is a Muslim. I have a brother is a Muslim. I live in a 93% Muslim in my hometown. And I also be a regent or mayor in my hometown for 93% Muslim.
With tension rising ahead of the governor's elections in February, there's not only fear of violence, but also over increasing anti-Chinese and anti-Christian sentiment. Step Fase, Al Jazeera, Jakarta.
And essentially, what concerned a lot of Chinese-Indonesian is that they saw Ahok being, there's photos where people had dummies of Ahok being hanged, and numerous people having, signs and slogans saying like, kill Ahok, kill Chinese-Indonesians. So basically this conflating of Ahok, who is Chinese-Indonesian, with how, basically a lot of other Chinese-Indonesians need to be punished as well for his actions. For me, I felt very disappointed. Mm-hmm. And you told me you were feeling really angry.
I think I was so upset back then because I feel like I'm from the working class and I don't feel like I know the upper class Chinese that lives in Pik and such, because my mom and my dad works for them, and they do have like a very different outlook in terms of their Indonesianness. Like, they don't really want to vote, they don't really care about what's happening in the government, but I do. My parents do. My dad even actually ran for election.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like regional election. So we really care a lot about our society, and so I was very disappointed that people actually still think after 1998 that we all actually don't care, and it's as if my efforts to make Chinese Indonesians more
integrated
to the society is not enough, and I felt betrayed. I felt like
the reaction towards Ahok and this whole Ganyangtina thing basically made you feel that you're not acknowledged as Indonesian.
Yes, I was very hurt actually. Like, I took it very personally.
Yeah.
What? Yeah, and
like, what more do you want, right?
Yeah.
It's like
and then suddenly it's just
but
undone.
overnight it can be undone, or there are so many people who still wouldn't accept us as Indonesians. That's the disappointment. And for me, the fear was that just by one person, they can point the blame to all Chinese-Indonesian again, and then talk about Chinese-Indonesians as if we're all the same, and we're all responsible about the economic system, and like all of this scapegoaty stuff came back overnight.
Come back.
Basically tells me that if any kind of economic problem happens, and then the leader at the time, blames the Chinese-Indonesian again, basically overnight, Chinese-Indonesians will be scapegoated, targeted, and killed again. And there is nothing that can stop that, because a big enough majority of Indonesians feel that that's right. Even educated, and this is what bothers me the most, even educated Muslim Indonesians, and not all, can still blames and like lumps Chinese-Indonesian together.
Every time I will say everything good about this country, the food, I'm an excellent tour guide.
Yeah.
But apparently to
it's
you,
not
I'm
enough.
I'm just some Chinese girl, and I don't, my voice don't matter.
If Ahok was any other minority or any other race besides Chinese-Indonesian, he would not be met with such ferocity in the way that he did.
There's this pressure that most Chinese-Indonesians need to be invisible.
Yeah.
I remember feeling really quite annoyed by my parents because they chose to have like this house that is very obvious looking, and I'm afraid that it will make us some sort of a target, which is actually like a ridiculous fear. But I think I don't know, I just want to be invisible.
So there's something about this denial of our ethnicity which exists because we don't feel safe and comfortable about being Chinese.
Yeah, totally. And
this goes back to the long history of
a very long history and
violence against Chinese-Indonesians.
Yeah, and a lot of it is about the New Order, because in the New Order we are forced, kind of, I don't know if it's totally forced or not, but we are forced to assimilate to the national identity of being Indonesian. Yeah.
Which I'm fine with. Like, basically for those who didn't know, under Suharto, people were forced to change their Chinese name into Indonesian sounding names.
Yeah.
And I mean, I never thought about it, but it's so messed up, right? Like, can you imagine like having to change your entire family's name to something that is not yours?
Yeah.
And I understand its purpose, but it's kind of like you're not allowed to celebrate Chinese New Year. You're not allowed to speak your own language.
Yes.
So this forced assimilation just kind of made us Chinese-Indonesians feel like more and more marginalized. And it's sort of like if Chinese culture is not allowed to be celebrated, it means that we're not truly Indonesian, right? Like, they're trying to remove that aspect of our heritage. Yeah. Whereas they're not trying to say like, oh, Balinese people or Batak people can't celebrate their own culture, right?
Yeah, which is weird. Like,
so basically the whole thing is that Chinese culture is not Indonesian. And sure, like, there's China. Like, we all maybe came from China.
But we're Chinese-Indonesians.
And, like, we don't speak Chinese. We don't feel any heritage or attachment to China.
That's a big problem to me. I was quite upset that I don't have, like, some sort of this root. And, I'm not Chinese, but you don't want to see me as Indonesian either.
Yeah.
So, it's so weird because I can't speak My parents would speak Kek and Teochew,
Yeah.
2 dialects, and they don't teach me anything, and they don't even I can't even speak Mandarin, which is so weird.
I don't speak. I mean, it's not weird. Like when we were growing up, there were no Chinese language schools, so how can we speak Mandarin, right?
Yeah, so we don't have
we don't have any roots.
We don't have the heritage.
And then, like when I studied abroad in China, basically Chinese people blame me for not speaking Chinese.
Yeah,
I am not considered Chinese either.
Yeah,
so it's sort of like
what is Chinese-Indonesian?
Because I think a lot of Chinese-Indonesians desperately feel that we are Indonesian, and the fact that we're always spit back in our face that you're not really Indonesian really hurts.
Yeah, I know.
To a degree, like with this Ahok thing,
it's confusing.
Basically, the rejection of Ahok to such the degree that he's rejected says a lot to a lot of Chinese-Indonesians in the sense that no, like we don't accept Chinese-Indonesians as pure Indonesians. You as Chinese people need to shut up.
Yes,
like that
exactly.
idea that sebagai orang Cina lo harus tahu malu atau like you have to know your place,
and, and it's so irrelevant because I am born here, and probably my earliest essay that got published, which was in Kompas Muda, which was kind of poetic because I'm not working there, sort of. It was about how I feel like an outsider because I'm not Indonesian. I was actually so keen on writing about that since I was in 10th grade. It was totally a big deal for me. Yeah. Especially because I don't know, I have this obsession to go on student exchanges and such. And one of the big part about those experiences are actually sharing your culture. I have none. I don't know. I feel like
that's true. Like what kind of culture?
What should I do?
Yeah.
Am I Sundanese because I live in Banten?
Yeah.
Am I Dayak because my parents are from Pontianak? So I was like, I don't know.
Like I wouldn't, for example, right? Like I wouldn't feel right trying to learn Chinese dance, and then I feel really uncomfortable about learning Japanese dance, right? Because I feel like that would be cultural appropriation.
Yeah, I know,
right?
It's not appropriation, but I have nothing. I have nothing to share.
Everything was taken from us culturally.
Yes, and the only thing I can do is probably just sing the national anthem. That's it. Like I only have like
so
this
we're like
identity.
we're like Indo-Lite. So I think it's useful to talk about structural racism in this sense because I think a lot of people think just because there's Chinese-Indonesian privilege that all Chinese-Indonesian people are the same. So when we're talking about, privilege, we're talking about, not all, but a lot of Chinese-Indonesians have privilege in the sense that a lot of Chinese-Indonesians are raised in families where they're more likely to be pushed to get as much education as possible, and the family would be willing to spend all of their money educating their children.
Definitely. Yes.
And taught to work hard, and that entrepreneurship is everything and money is everything. So when you're raised in that kind of environment, I think if everybody's raised that way, a lot more people are going to succeed in the economic way.
Yes,
because that kind of like education helps in the system of capitalism.
Yeah, totally.
And these are two different categories. Not all Chinese-Indonesians are economically privileged.
They're not rich, guys.
Yeah.
Total misconception.
The majority of Chinese-Indonesians, if anything, are also very poor, right? And in addition to this history and cultural thing is that I think what a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of the roots why people emphasize education and entrepreneurship is because we don't have any government jobs offered. That's the only route where we can have money, and we also don't have any institution that has our backs. And if you are in trouble, you feel that the police or the military will not help you unless you pay them to.
Yeah.
Like there's this feeling that money is security.
We only need to pay more.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like who doesn't want security? So there's this idea that, like, especially after 98, after 65, there's always this idea for a lot of Chinese-Indonesians that you need to have enough money and save enough money and put that money abroad just in case another ethnic cleansing does happen. And I think a lot of it is anger too, because no one has ever been punished for it, killing.
Yeah, because we refuse to talk about it, which is
insulting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so difficult to talk about racism in Indonesia because stereotyping is really easy.
Yeah.
But
the difference is that I think it's definitely a big misconception that there's structural racism perpetrated by the Chinese-Indonesians towards Indonesians. Because that really forgets the definition of structural racism in the sense that there needs to be social, cultural, economic, and institutional power control that the Chinese-Indonesians have to oppress pribumi Indonesians.
Yeah.
And that doesn't exist. Like, societally, individuals can be racist. Maybe some institutions can be prejudiced, but it's not the same as, you know, structural racism by white Americans to black Americans, where you have a policy that, like, you know, redlining is one of them. So basically, black people cannot get loans for, you know, buying homes as easily as white Americans, or, you know, police brutality. So, like, all of these things. Like, so, for example, you don't have Chinese-Indonesians in the police or the military, or really in the government. So basically, if anything, there's institutional racism against Chinese-Indonesians in Indonesia. I mean, as you can see, Ahok is someone who is in a way penalized for his ethnicity, right?
Yeah. I actually bring my passport every time because I'm afraid of ethnic cleansing.
Are you serious?
Yeah. I just like...
Really?
I don't know, I just like... I'm Indonesian.
It's like a proof, like a paper.
I don't know. Like, there's like this weird superstition of mine. I just have to carry my passport. Like, people actually laugh at me, but, well, what the heck?
Whoa. I didn't know that you... Well, okay.
Yeah, I carry my passport every time.
Like, you
None
know...
of my family does that, only me.
And, like, you know, in our KTP before, there was a number 9 for our national ID numbers.
Yeah.
That's what you call institutional racism, by the way.
Yeah.
That's institutional racism.
Ugly violence brewing in the Chinese quarter of Jakarta as thousands of Indonesian youths riot in resentment against a peaceful Chinese protest earlier. Stores are smashed and the mob terrorizes the local Chinese, ignoring appeals by the Indonesian foreign minister. Increasing hostility toward the Chinese stems from an abortive coup 2 years ago, allegedly the work of Chinese Reds. Street beatings and bloodshed turned Jakarta's downtown section into an arena of anarchy. No Chinese citizen is safe.
My grandma told me that during the 66 communist cleansing, whatever.
/ Chinese cleansing.
Yeah. She actually had like a stash of her books, which are all in Mandarin. Yeah. So she stashed it and buried it. Yeah. And they live by the river, so...
I got
they're all gone. And she was like, no. And I was like, oh God. But she was so afraid to put it in the house, so...
Yeah, so she during that time she didn't feel like it was safe to be Chinese, right?
Yeah.
A majority of Chinese-Indonesian families have had families killed because of anti-Chinese sentiments.
Yeah.
And that should be a study, right? But like
it's difficult.
Families from both of my sides have been, you know, killed as a result of anti-Chinese sentiments. So yeah, so it's like that's very much part of my identity and like knowledge that, you know, the sentiments, whenever you're talking about anti-Chinese sentiments, isn't just an opinion. This is something, a general pattern of thinking that has resulted to half of my grandparents' siblings are dead because of that, you know?
God.
Yeah, so it's not like completely just theoretical for me. It's like real.
Yeah.
I think it forced us to see the reality, which is we're far from being recognized as truly Indonesian by a lot of Indonesians, and that disaster and violence could break out again at any time.
Yeah.
And that's really disappointing and hurtful. I think you can't really define Chinese-Indonesian identity without our history of ethnic cleansing and just everything bad, right? Like, like being set apart, because you can't define Chinese-Indonesian without saying that Chinese-Indonesian is not fully Indonesian. That's part of the salt in the wound, right? Thank you so much for listening to us this week. We hope you kind of took away something from it. Thanks so much for Tika. As always, music credits to Jazzart, Ryan Little, and Bro for Free.
And if you haven't followed us on YouTube, our latest channel, you should definitely follow us.
We're also still going to be on SoundCloud, but we want to highlight YouTube a bit more.
And also, it's a lot easier, I guess, to listen on YouTube than, say, like open up SoundCloud or, go into iTunes and download the podcast. So we're trying to make it easier for you guys to listen, to enjoy the episodes.
Yeah. And once again, we always really want feedback. So email us at dialogikapodcast@gmail.com, or send us a Facebook message or comment on YouTube.
And as always, we'll have resources and links at our website, dialogika.id. And
thanks so much for listening.